Welcome, everyone. It's a delight to be here with you today. My name is Max Orr. I'm Executive Director for Carolina Public Humanities, the public outreach arm for the College of Arts and Sciences. And this is Humanities in Action every Wednesday, except for the last Wednesday of every month. I just wanted to open up about AI in our imagination. I'm sure I'm not going to make any judgments on age, but I bet there are people in this room who saw 2001 Space Odyssey or something like that. So many of that's already in our imagination, of course. It's already in practice. We had a sort of funny moment here. Our colleague Paul Bonici decided to let AI write our advertisement this week, and we sent it out, and then our speaker wrote us about 30 minutes later and said, that's not at all what I'm going to be talking about. So you can see that AI has a mind of its own in some places. Also, in practice, I teach in the history department and have been teaching for years. And for years, I've trusted my students to do online evaluations. And we run those things through, avoiding plagiarism and things like that have been easy to do. But when I actually took my first look at AI earlier, maybe late spring, and did some of my tests with AI, I said, you know what, if a student handed this in, it would fool me. It would be okay. It was pretty good. It was pretty good at a basic level. But then I said, well, let's not give up on that. So my students are using Blue Books now for their exams, and I get to see how much penmanship has declined in that. So they gripe about that a little bit. But we also brought AI into the classroom. And one of the great things that we're doing now is when we study something for a couple of weeks, I'm teaching a course on France and Algeria, and we learn something for a couple of weeks, and then we take a day and we ask AI for some answers, and then the students critique the AI's answers, and AI is listening apparently. That is a new sound for me. And anyway, so it's been very interesting to see. I also was surprised that only about a third of my students had even tried it yet, so that's also interesting. Now I've taught them all how to use it. But again, we find some really, really great ways of incorporating this technology into our classroom to generate discussion. So we can see just in these little anecdotes, I've given you a wide range of ways that AI can be used, can make mistakes, can help, maybe encourage students to cheat or not, but been very, very eye-opening for us, and it's also not going away, and that's why we are having today's discussion. And we have UNC's point person for AI. You've done many events in the last, including an event last Tuesday that we put on with the Carolina alumni on AI, a panel. So we're really very happy to have Mark McNeilly with us. He's professor of the practice of marketing at the Kenan-Flagler Business School. Attended University of Wisconsin-La Crosse as an undergraduate and received his MBA from the University of Minnesota. He came into the academy with a wealth of real-world experience, working with IBM and Lenovo, among many others, sharing his knowledge in branding, strategy, marketing, market intelligence, management, manufacturing, and personnel. He has consulted on strategy and marketing with corporations and individuals across the world, including the U.S. Air Force Command Staff College, and has been featured in national and international media outlets for his ideas on strategy. At Kenan-Flagler, Professor McNeilly teaches on marketing and organizational behavior and on AI, as I learned today, and that would be the other topics. He also is a faculty advisor for the STAR program, which matches teams of the brightest MBA and undergraduate business students with corporate partners to solve their complex challenges. Melding this business know-how with humanities knowledge, which would music to our ears, he is the author of Sun Tzu and the Art of Business, 6 Strategic Principles for Managers, and also George Washington and the Art of Business, Leadership Principles of America's First Commander-in-Chief. Both of these books are from Oxford University Press. Professor McNeilly also serves on the UNC Chapel Hill Faculty Council, and again, as I mentioned, has been a vocal proponent of AI explaining and helping us, including a faculty colloquium in the middle of the summer that I attended with several hundred folks on Zoom, faculty members stressing out about what they were going to do. So calming nerves, giving us information, and letting us get a glimpse into the future. Please welcome Mark McNeilly as he presents the democratization of AI. Take it away.
Okay, thank you all for coming. we'll talk about the democratization of AI, basically how generative AI, I'm going to distinguish between generative AI and traditional AI, will change our world. One of the things when you think about the impact of generative AI, it is a major milestone. I think it's been a real game changer since it was announced basically the last day of November of last year. Has far-reaching implications and applications. And when I say implications, that's how it's going to change our world. Applications is how we might use it for our competitive advantage, right? And it can more directly, it's different than traditional AI, right? We know through Siri, right? We know Alexa, we do Google search, right? That's traditional AI. It's usually kind of a little bit behind the scenes. Generative AI is different in that it can more fully interact with us, right? And more fully perform a lot of the things that we do as humans. And it's only going to get better at that. And so this not only affects organizations and individuals, but also society overall and humanity. And it's something we obviously need to think about because it's going to impact us positively and negatively. And so as individuals, we need to holistically understand the applications and implications of ever more powerful AI on our organizations and ourselves. Max kindly went through my biography, but basically I was very interested in technology. I worked in the tech industry. So this is one of the things that attracted me. And being in marketing, basically your job is to, in the tech industry, you're basically trying to take complex technological concepts and offerings and explain them in terms of benefits or what they mean to, normal people, right? Oh yeah, so I also wrote, as Max mentioned, the Sun Tzu's Art of War, Sun Tzu's Art of Business. So I was asked to be on the History Channel Art of War special. So if you're ever up late at night watching the History Channel and you see a guy that looks like this, that is me. So I am the co-chair with Dean Stan Ahald, who's the head of the School of Data Science and Society. It's the newest school at UNC, of the UNC Generative AI Committee. And so what we wanted to do, we went to the provost and all the 15 deans of all the academic units, and we said, hey, this is an issue. Actually, I sent a note to the provost back in January of this year, and then we were able to get the provost and all the deans to say, yes, this is something super important for UNC. And so we had a generative AI committee, which had representatives from all of the 15 schools and some key organizations. And we really focused on two things. One is we didn't call it policy because policy is a different level within UNC, but guidance, right? For student use, teaching use, research, and staff operations. And then secondly, we moved into educating, right? So we needed to educate people, familiarize them with what is this, what does it mean, how does it change teaching, research, et cetera. So what I'll do is I'll take you through a little introduction to what generative AI is. I'll talk about what you can do with it, the upsides and downsides, talk a little bit about organizations and generative AI, and then building a generative AI strategy. But first I want to get into a couple of questions. How often do you personally use generative AI? So I'm going to ask some questions. So I'm going to ask you, use it daily, 2 to 3 times a week, only use it a few times, I've never used it. So how many people use it daily, generative AI, like ChatGPT? Okay, how many use it 2 to 3 times a week? Okay, how many have used it only a few times? Okay, how many have you never used it? Okay, that's actually not too far off from a lot of our professors, so yes, ma'am. Oh, there's a special app where you're going to use it mostly now. You'll see it integrated into other apps, but like if you're using ChatGPT, you got to have it log into a specific application. Yeah. What best describes your feelings about ChatGPT, generative AI in the future? I am very excited. I am mildly interested. It won't matter much. I'm somewhat scared. I'm terrified. You could be excited and terrified at the same time. That's kind of where I am. It depends on the time of day, right? So this has been in the news a lot, right? Bill Gates has been talking about, hey, it's as big as the internet. Some people say it's as big as fire, right? It's going to change fundamentally how we do things. So it's not just going to be these standalone applications. It's going to be integrated into applications we use every day. There are companies, Meta, Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, that are pouring billions of dollars into generative AI. That's why it's advancing so quickly. It's changing the way we work. It's changing the skills that are needed, right? And it also, oh, by the way, could lead to the extinction of humanity. So there's that. So Vladimir Lenin, who doesn't get quoted a lot in the business school, he said there are decades where nothing happens and there are weeks when decades happen, right? talking about 1917, but of course, I think that was true also with ChatGPT. And if you look at the time it took to reach 1 million users, Netflix took 3.5 years, Airbnb 2.5 years, ChatGPT, it took 5 days, right? It hit 100 million users in 2 months, right? Fastest growing application. This is what it looks like. So it's extremely simple user interface, very much like Google's interface, right? And it tells you a few things you could do with it, and then you just type in whatever it is you want to type in, right? And at the bottom, it's got a little disclaimer that says, I might provide inaccurate information, right? So that's kind of like, hey, we'll talk about that, right? There's 2 versions of it. We'll talk about the different versions. 3.5 is free. 4 is $20 a month, and it has much, much greater capabilities, which we'll get a little bit into. How does it work? It's trained on what's called a large language model. So it's basically a set of about 500 billion words that have been taken primarily from the internet. It's put into something called a neural network, which is a computer version of our human brains, right? Our brains have neurons in them, and they're organized in a network. And it uses a practice of deep learning to train itself. It basically predicts what speech comes next. So if I said got up on the wrong side of the right, so that's what it does. People think about it as autocomplete on steroids. So like if you're typing, you get autocomplete, right, and half the time it's wrong. This is a lot better than autocomplete. It stands for generative pre-trained transformer. Generative means it generates, right? Genesis, right, comes from the Greek translation of the Hebrew words in the beginning. It's pre-trained. And so it's trained on all these 500 billion words, and transformers a particular architecture of AI that it uses. ChatGPT's large language model is one of many. There are ones from Google, and there's lots of other open source ones. It has biases, and it's wrong because it's trained on human content, and it is also trained by humans. So you can see where it's scraped from, right? Primarily, most of it's from the web, some is from books. And then once it's trained, you have this model, which is kind of wild, and so it's got to be trained by humans through something called reinforcement learning human feedback. So people get the responses, and they say, this is a good response, this is a bad response. And as it learns through there, like what to say and what not to say. And those are primarily people in Kenya making $3 an hour doing the RLHF, right? So, yeah. And you can look at that as one of 2 things, like $3 an hour maybe might not say so much to us, but it may be sufficient in Kenya. So it does hallucinate. This is basically when it makes things up, but it makes it up in a very confident manner. And ChatGPT 3.5 is worse at that. The new version 4 is better. So for example, it invented a sexual harassment scandal about a professor that was not me. And so that's kind of one of the things it does. It makes stuff up, right? Generative AI is a name for a set of tools that generate output from human prompts. And it turns it into things that's a little bit hard for you to see, but it turns it into things like text, video, audio, code, computer code, right? 3D models, so music. So it can generate many things, right? That's why it's called generative AI. Okay, I made that picture, for example, right? Actually, I didn't make the picture. I did a prompt, and it made the picture, right? So it does images as well. Boy, I don't remember. I don't remember. I'd have to go back. That's a good question, though. So we'll get a little bit out of the upside and downside of generative AI. And I like this. Kranzberg has 7 different laws. And his first law is technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral, right? There are going to be winners. There are going to be losers from generative AI, as there is with any introduction of technology. The upside is it can significantly increase our productivity. They've seen it in different tasks. It can actually be very creative. It can improve our economy. It can give you access to knowledge at very low cost in neighborhoods or countries where you don't have doctors, for example, right? It can give you that information. And theoretically, it can solve humanity's most complex problems. DeepMind, which is it's just the part of Google that works on generative AI. Basically, their mission statement is get to super intelligent artificial intelligence. And the second thing is solve all the world's problems. And that is literally their mission statement. What it does well, you can see I've got a Swiss Army knife, right? But a much bigger one. This is just ChatGPT. It answers questions, it writes, it codes, it summarizes, it explains concepts, brainstorms, translates languages. It actually has learned languages that it was not expected to learn. So that's something called emergent properties, right? It starts doing things you did not plan for it to do, design it to do, which is both exciting and terrifying. So there are lots of generative AI systems, so it's a little hard to see, but ChatGPT 3.5, that comes from a company called OpenAI, which is in San Francisco, which is owned 49% of it by Microsoft. And there's a free version. It's not connected to the internet, but it's pretty good, right? ChatGPT 4, it is now able to be connected to the internet. It's got things called like plugins and code interpreters that just give it a whole lot more function. And it's just a step up over 3.5, but it does cost $20 a month. Bing is Google's attempt at generative AI. It's not very good. It's going to be replaced by something called Genesis, which they're saying is going to be better than ChatGPT. There's a new one called Anthropic's Claude, which is pretty much like ChatGPT 4. Costs the same as well as ChatGPT 4. What can I do with it? I can do all the things I do around the office. I can write, I can learn, I can brainstorm, I can get summaries. So let me show you a few things that I did. So write an email welcoming Susan Doe to the marketing department. Her role will be brand manager. So wherever you see that little purple thing that says MC, that's me with prompting, and then in the green is the response, right? So it shoots out instantaneously, right? A nice little letter for Susan. All I have to do is then cut and paste that into my email and hit send. Okay. Building a PowerPoint presentation just like this one. Give me the slide headlines for a PowerPoint presentation on how to sell. So it shoots those out, right? I can then say, okay, introduction to selling, the top one, I can say, just give me the bullets, the sub bullets for all of those. And it will give me those, right? I can cut and paste those into a PowerPoint slide. And it's going to get easier than that. I'll show you what that looks like. If I'm doing a meeting and I want to figure out like what's my purpose and agenda, it will do that automatically, right? So I'll ask it, I'll prompt to give me a purpose and agenda for a meeting on X. It will do that. It'll be very complete. It will do it very fast. And then I can edit it from there. Right? Outlining an article. So it's outlining an article on leadership. It, again, breaks that all down. And then it gives me these subtopics. I can ask it to give me bullets on those topics, right? Or even you can have it ask, you can just basically have it write for you. I wouldn't recommend that, depending on what your goal is. You can ask it for advice. I have a conflict with a coworker, right? Give me a framework to handle that. It says, okay, identify the source of the conflict, look beyond the incident, request solutions, find a resolution, agree on a way forward. So it gives you lots of advice, right, that can help you out. There's something called TLDR, or too long didn't read. And it's basically a nice way, like in articles, you'll see TLDR and like a little paragraph explaining what the article is, and then the whole article if you want to read the article. If you use the TLDR function and then you cut and paste an article into ChatGPT, it will summarize it for you, right? With plugins, you can also have it summarize PDFs or videos, for example. So one of the things we do in the business school is have students design products. And so I said, let's try this. So this is product design with Bing Chat. So Bing Chat is Microsoft's. So again, Microsoft owns the 49% of OpenAI. They take ChatGPT, they put it into their search, and it's called Bing Chat, right? And it's connected to the internet. And so what it will do is give you not just the answer like ChatGPT when you prompt it, but also the internet sites it pulled the information for. So it's actually going into the internet, not just to the large language model and pulling that back out. So I said, pardon me? Yeah, it's free. It's kind of a hassle to get into, but because you have to it doesn't work on Chrome, it works on Edge. But it's definitely worth it, and it creates images. So I said, Bing, look up the latest trends in men's shoes. Show me a picture of what those would look like that you think would be trendy. So it gives me all the trends, gives me the websites, and then it gives me a picture of what that product might look like, right? And then I said, okay, so give me some brand names for those shoes, a positioning statement as well. So it gives me Sway, Lush, Zest. It gives me positioning statements which tell you how this product is different than other products. And then I said, give me a logo based on Zest, right? And so it popped out some logos. And I can regenerate. I can just hit regenerate and then get a whole bunch more. Right? Did that in 15 minutes. That's usually a project for a couple weeks for students, right? It has some new capabilities, so you can talk to it and it'll hear you. You can put images in so it can see, quote, see, right? So I cut and pasted this image from a book and I said, recreate this table, but remove that middle column, right? And it did that. So it created a thing on the right, right? So again, like in a couple minutes. Longest thing it took me was to take the picture and put it in there. This compares ChatGPT 3.5, right? The version that came out in November of last year to ChatGPT 4, which is the new version, the $20 version, which came out in the spring. You can see the increases on how well it does on tests that we take, right? The GRE, the bar exam, et cetera. It's only going to get better. Midjourney is an image creation generator, right? So you can see from February 2022 to May of 2022 how much the capabilities have been improved, right? Pretty significantly. And now it's, it's a year and a half later, right? So it's like even better. So it basically gives you a increase in your ability to access knowledge. So I use it a lot to explain concepts for myself. Creativity and productivity. Those are the three big areas. So it provides me faster, better, cheaper access to knowledge, insights, wisdom, ideas, connections, and stories. So then I can then go create new content, right? Text, audio, music, video. So I can be smarter, wiser, more impactful. Right? This is a guy, Rob Henderson, who I follow, and he was talking about this PhD student who came to him and said, hey, how great it was to do his PhD dissertation with, being able to use ChatGPT. And Rob had just finished his 6 months before he could actually use ChatGPT. So it's he said, it's I feel like the guy who got polio a week before the vaccine came out. So what I'm going to do is, anyone know Ryan Reynolds? A pretty popular guy, right? So he owns a company called Mint, and he wanted to use AI to build a commercial for them. So he used ChatGPT. So let's see it.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds, owner of Mint Mobile. We're always looking for ways to save you money. So this year, we're kicking things off with an ad that I created using ChatGPT, the AI technology. This is what I asked it to write. I said, write a commercial for Mint Mobile in the voice of Ryan Reynolds. Use a joke, a curse word, and let people know that Mint's holiday promo is still going, even after the big wireless companies have ended theirs. This is what it wrote. Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here. Eerie. First of all, let me just say Mint Mobile is the shit. But here's the thing. All the big wireless companies out there are ending their holiday promos, but not Mint Mobile. We're keeping the party going because we're just that damn good. Give Mint Mobile a try. And hey, as an added bonus, if you sign up now, you'll get to hear my voice every time you call customer service. Just kidding, that's not really a thing. And stay classy, everyone. That is mildly terrifying, but compelling.
Okay, so it's changing how things are done, right? Marketing is one of the areas that's going to get impacted significantly. Sales, coding, it's changing real estate, right? People can write, the copy for a house, do the social media content. And one of the interesting things this person says at the bottom, which is totally true, it's hey, it really depends on how well I prompt, right? When I say prompt, it's what I'm entering into the chat. Because it's just like the same with old computers, right? Garbage in, garbage out. If you have a bad prompt, you are going to get bad output. And a lot of people who I think have gotten bad output and has basically abandoned ChatGPT or any generative AI is they just haven't prompted well, right? 9 out of 10 companies that are hiring want workers with ChatGPT or generative AI experience, right? So it's becoming very important. And so Roger Bacon, who is the founder of the scientific method, so he had this saying, he said, to ask the proper question is half of knowing. And that's really what prompting is, right? Knowing what to ask and how to prompt well so you get good output out. Right, so this was AI prompt here was salmon in the river, right? So it's, it's like salmon you would see in the grocery store and they put it in the river. So prompting is important. So how do you do it? You can think of it almost as if you think about, how many people like Harry Potter? Okay, so this will play the room mostly. Okay, So it's basically conjuring up spells, right, to get stuff out of the computer that you want, right? So you need to have domain knowledge. So you need to know what it is you're asking about, right? So if I want to learn about finance, I probably need to know something about finance, right, to ask the right prompt. Then you got to basically spend a lot of time prompting, right, trying it, and then also understanding the model that you're using, whether it's ChatGPT-4 or Anthropic, right, or Bing. So you need to know those things. But a big part of it is just practicing, right, playing with it. And what you're going to see is you're going to see still standalone applications like ChatGPT-4 or Anthropic, but it's being integrated into many other applications that we use every day. Any software company is asking itself, should I integrate ChatGPT or generative AI capabilities into my product, right? And so what I want to show you, Microsoft, again, has a tight relationship with OpenAI. What they're doing is something called Copilot. And what you're able to do, what they're doing, so, PowerPoint, Excel, right, Word, they're taking generative AI, ChatGPT, and putting it in there. So I'm going to show you what that's going to look like. So I showed that to my MBA students, and they were pretty freaked out because, like, what am I going to do? But that's why you need that domain knowledge, right? You're still going to have someone to know the right questions to ask to create that content and know where to find it. This is available now for companies. It's going to be available in higher education in about 4 months, and we are trying to get it at UNC. The downside, there's things called the alignment problem. There are a lot of legal and ethical challenges with it. That will impact jobs, and there's fake news is another issue with generative AI. Questioning of like who has the access to these tools, right? There's some students are willing to pay for ChatGPT-4. It puts them at an advantage over those that are using the free version, and of course the impact on humanity. So the alignment problem is when you want the computer to do this, and it starts doing that, but then it starts going off and doing something you didn't want it to. And so Amazon created this AI recruiting tool, and what they want to do was like, hey, we have a bunch of great people. I want to hire new people, just like the great people I have. Makes sense, right? And the only problem was the majority of people that they hired before were men. And so what it did when it found a woman recruit or candidate, it kicked her out, right? And so obviously they had to get rid of this tool. There are lots of legal risks with generative AI. It does hallucinate, we know that, right? There was a lawyer who created a whole case, or basically he was making his case to a judge, and he used ChatGPT to look up prior cases, and it made them all up. And he put it in his submission, and I think I don't think he got disbarred, but basically the judge was like, I never want to see you again. Privacy, so when you put data into this, depending on if you're using the public tool, that data is now out there. It's being analyzed by OpenAI. Intellectual property, yes, sir.
If you know that the response is wrong, and there's a place to God and make comments.
Yeah. Yeah, the product. So this is a part of what it makes it special. So it's learning from you, right? There's also usually a little thumbs up and thumbs down you can give it. Yeah. So they want to learn from you. Yeah. Intellectual property, right? They scraped all these data off the internet, right? It was somebody else's data or art that was created by other people, and now they're generating new things with it. Yes, sir. Yeah. No. Because it basically was thought of as free use, but that's why it's a legal issue. So now a lot of these people whose data was scraped are either saying you can't do it and I'm going to charge you, or some are saying like you owe me money, right? Or if you're going to do this in the future, right, you owe me money. So New York Times is going to OpenAI and basically saying, if you don't start paying me money for this and probably paying me money for what I did, I'm going to go to the court and make you wipe out all of your 500 billion words, right? So lots of challenging issues with generative AI. When you look at jobs, so Goldman Sachs did an analysis, and they said 2/3 of US professions, basically any cognitive job, any knowledge worker job, will be impacted. Up to 25 to 50% of the tasks may be replaced by or automated by generative AI. And there's lots of, I know it's hard to see, but higher ed's like number one on the list. STEM professionals, office support, managers, health professionals is going to be very big in healthcare. And so AI is going to substantially change most, if not all, probably all cognitive jobs, right? It's going to eliminate some in some specific professions, but in others, it might free up time for people to go spend more time with customers, right? So it might be actually helpful in some places, like in healthcare, it potentially could give you more time to spend with patients. And it's going to create some new jobs. And there's this cool taxonomy. This was done for professors. This was by a guy up at MIT, and he said there's kind of four types of people. So there's people who just are pretending it never happened. So if you think of a professor, it's like, I'm pretending it never happened. I'm just doing everything like I did before, and I'm just going to hope that nothing goes wrong. People that are doing their writing assignments aren't using it, right? There's resistors. So these would be professors, this applies to anyone really, who know that it's out there, and they are making a principled stand to not use it, right? They're afraid from the professor's standpoint that it will hurt how students learn. There's people like myself who are experimenting with it, right? Trying it out, seeing how it changes things in the classroom or in their job. And there's reflectors who are experimenters, but who are then thinking about how will it change, and they're writing about and talking about how it will change their jobs or society. And so what I tell people is you're not going to be replaced by AI, you're going to be replaced by someone who knows AI, right? That's the challenge, right? Yeah. Yes and no. They would say younger people. I mean, I'm not like a spring chicken, buddy. It really depends. I mean, part of it's a personality, right? So I've got a lot of students where I'm like pushing them to learn it. And it's like, it's unbelievable. Yes, sir. Well, no one just ignores it and then uses it often. No one's going to ever, if you don't, why would you? It just doesn't that's a null box, basically. Yeah, yeah. Now there will still be with this change here. There are going to be some skills that you will need more now than perhaps before this existed, right? If you'll still need domain-specific knowledge in order to ask the right prompts, right? In order to make sure that what is coming out is correct. You'll still need imagination to make connections between different ideas, but generative AI can help you do that. You'll still need to take the initiative, right? There's people who just like to kind of sit back and see what happens, right? And there's people who make things happen, right? If you're someone who makes things happen, you're going to be at an advantage. If generative AI takes over more writing skills, it may come down now to it's more about how you present. It's more about how you speak. It's more about how you influence people face to face, right? Think about it almost as going back to the oral tradition, going back to ancient Greece and Rome and rhetoric. Organizational skills, you need to understand how to get things done in an organization and build a network to enable you to do that. A big thing I think is going to be very important, right, is adaptability, resilience, and ability to cope with uncertainty. That's coming with technology. It's also coming geopolitically. This world that we've been in where we kind of took a vacation from history, that's all over now. And you're going to need generative AI skills. And so our philosophy at UNC is that generative AI is going to be here. Students need to have it, right? But we want it to help you think, not think for you. Help you think, not think for you. And now moving to organizations, that same corollary, right? Slow organizations won't be eliminated by generative AI. They'll be eliminated by fast adopters of AI. So within UNC, we are moving as quickly as we can to adopt generative AI and figure out a way forward. This last weekend, well, not last weekend, on Monday, we had a meeting with the technology partner, all the deans, the provost, and a whole bunch of other folks, figuring out how do we get the university to move forward and be a leader in generative AI, right? We're probably one of the top universities as far as moving as quickly as a university can. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about some additional topics, organizations, and beyond. So when we look at history, I like this quote, all history is a history of unintended consequences. So what you see here is the cumulative change in US gum sales since the iPhone came out, and you can see it decreased significantly. And the hypothesis is that people, when you used to be in the grocery aisle, right, checking out, you didn't have anything to do, so you saw some gum and you picked it up, right? Now it's like, no, I'm on my phone, so I'm not looking around to go pick up gum or candy. And there are lots of signals of how an industry gets disrupted. One of it is major technological changes, which is fundamentally what this is. This is a significant major technological change. And what you see here is all the ways and all those things on the left are ways that are things that humans can do, right? And that red line is the time, 2055, when before ChatGPT, people thought it could really approximate how, our human capability, right? Then ChatGPT 3.5 came out, and that whole thing moved to 2030, right? And so there's three paradoxes, or what I call three paradoxes of generative AI: the great equalizer, the better human than humans, and the creator and the destroyer. So the great equalizer is that it can take, so you have two types of people. You have experts and people that are, you have experts and the novices or people that are less skilled, right? And what it will do is it will improve the experts, but it will improve the less skilled much more, right? So it decreases significantly the gap between the experts and the non-experts. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. No, a lot of this is, the problem is it's very opaque. It depends on what was scraped in. And unlike other traditional programming, you can't go back and figure out where the answer came from. So, because it's like a human brain, right? It's like I can't go track back. If you ask me a question, I could tell you something, but you can't really go back and track in my brain where that answer came from. So it's the same kind of a thing. It's very different than a programmer. Yeah, you may not know what it does. Yeah, you'll find, if you're an expert in this and it tells you something, you should be able to tell, like, is it hallucinating or not? Yeah, but that's why you need domain knowledge. Okay, so what you see here, this was some work that was done with consultants. They looked at 18 different tasks. So on the left side are the less skilled, the bottom half skilled participants. You can see on the right half are the top skilled. So you can see the gap on the left, right? Or the left was, in between the left and the right, the less skilled and the more skilled, was 1.15, right? But then after they both used generative AI, that gap fell to 0.29, okay? And if you're a top half skilled that's sitting there at 5.2, and you don't use generative AI, but somebody in the bottom half does, they've now surpassed you. They went to 5.79. So it's gonna change a lot of things that we do. It's gonna automate a lot of processes, like hopefully things like scheduling meetings. It can do brainstorming. It can speed up the writing process for press releases, for example. This is a picture that was generated by generative AI. And it's going to be better in a lot of things. It's faster, right? In some way, for some things, it's more accurate. It's actually very good at empathy and patience. So they found that for doctors, it actually has better bedside manner than doctors, right? It's infinitely patient. It's available 24/7. And you can ask it as many things as you want, and it's not going to get it aggravated. They did a test at the University of Colorado against college students, and they found out for a task like, give me as many possible uses for a brick, it performed better than 99% of college students. There was a test at Wharton where they pitted it against MBAs, and there were 200 MBA ideas, 200 ideas from ChatGPT, and they took the top 10%, which were the top 40 ideas. 35 of those 40 ideas came from ChatGPT. So when people say it's not creative, that's not right. It's not true. Right. Well, I mean, you'll never get it. I mean, MBAs are pretty confident. And so this idea that humans need to be involved in every step, right? But if you pull it into the military realm, there's a thing called the kill chain, right? From when you find the enemy to when you actually shoot the missile and hopefully take them out, right? And there's a whole bunch of steps in there, and it's called the kill chain, right? And the idea is that in the U.S. military, humans have to be involved in every step of the kill chain to make sure it doesn't go off and do the wrong thing. But whenever you put a human in there, you're going to slow the process down. So if you're China, you're saying, like, do I keep a human in the kill chain? Or do I let it go on its own where it's going to be faster than the Americans, right? There's the creator and the destroyer, and I use the picture of Shiva, who's the Hindu god of creation, destruction, and transformation. And generative AI creates content, right? It's in the name, Genesis, right? It creates new tools, new use cases, jobs, and firms, but it also will destroy jobs, tools, and companies, okay? It's going to transform our world. We don't know quite how yet, but we know it's going to be a massive change. And so what I'm telling people, which they don't really like, right, is that we're not destined to live in quiet times, right? It's going to be with the geopolitical change, the technological change. It's going to be a very dynamic environment. Hence, you need the resilience. Right? It also alters value propositions and business models in multiple industries. So you have to rethink your strategy if you're running a business. It's a little hard to see, but when you look at the different functions within a business, the ones that are impacted most are things like sales, marketing, software engineering, product R&D, customer operations. Those are things that are more customer facing, right? You're interacting with humans, and because generative AI is good at being more human-like, that's a expected place for it to be good at, right? You're starting to see it automate a number of simple tasks, so things like creating first drafts of documents, personalized marketing, identifying some trends and market needs, but it's also doing things like creating new product designs, which is advanced, right? So sort of like I showed you with those shoes. There's lots of different ways it can transform things. It's being used in product research. I'm not going to dive into each of these, but it can transform product research. It can transform software engineering. It's going to do coding much faster than humans, right? It can help throughout the whole process of a marketing campaign, right? Very creative. It can translate, right? It can significantly shorten the amount of time it takes to do one of these. And customer operations, so those chat bots you have now, right, when you go on a website that are kind of not so great, it's going to get a lot better, right, with generative AI. I'll just do that one. So one thing that's happening is that in these organizations, that people don't realize is that people are using it. Even though there's a policy against it, people are using it, right? They're just not telling their bosses because they don't know what the policy is. And so this term called by Ethan Mollick, he calls them secret cyborgs. So there's these people, and you don't need any special skills. All you need to know is how to speak, your language and have access to ChatGPT, and you can use it, right? You don't have to be a programmer at all. Right, so these people are all out through the organization, and we've got to find them in our organization, and so we're trying to do, and bring them together so that we can work to move forward on generative AI. But this is a little bit busy chart. This isn't going to happen as fast as we think it's going to happen, right? There's lots of bottlenecks in processes. There's a lot of tasks I can automate, but you can't automate all of my job, right? We don't know when generative AI might run out of capability and how it might hit a wall. And plus you've got lots of regulations, right? Biden just came out with an executive order on AI that's going to change significantly how AI gets developed. And it's happening in Japan, it's happening in China, it's happening and they're all different. Every geography and country is going to be different. So the companies are going to have to deal with that, right? So there was this new executive order he issued on Monday, right? The people that had the data that was taken from them, right, and you put into the large language model, they're now saying like, no, you don't get to do that anymore, or I'm going to charge you. And there's lots of people starting to sue OpenAI and Microsoft and Google, right? Yes, I just did that. And if you look back at these technological advances, the adoption of electricity took 3.5 decades for all the industries, right? It's going to be faster than that with generative AI, but it's going to take some time. And so it's going to follow an adoption curve, right? There's going to be some people at the beginning, right, who use it, and you want to be one of those that's ahead of the curve if you're in a company or any type of organization, right? Because you're going to reap the benefits before everyone else does. And we're kind of in what's called the hype cycle. So Gartner has a thing of like, everybody's excited, we're getting all this news about it, and then we're going to start trying to implement it, and it's hard. It's like any technology. It's not just a technology, it's also there's a big people thing, right? People are very slow to adapt. There's people that don't want it and push back. So we're going to go through this chasm where it gets tough, but then eventually it's going to really, just like we all have electricity now, right? It's going to be everywhere. So some lessons that we learned that we did from so we had this task force, this committee that ran throughout the summer. So we had actually professors working through the summer, on a corporate schedule, right? We were driving this committee very hard to get ready for fall. And we found out, some of the lessons we learned. It's got, generative AI has huge potential, but it's also got some major challenges. There's a lot of inertia. The big things that we wanted to get done was educating people on what it could do, and then also guidance on how to use it properly, right? I use a Sisyphus picture, right? Sisyphus rolls the thing up, and then it rolls back down, and the next day it does it again. That's kind of what it is with keeping up with generative AI, right? I get through it the day I look through all the generative AI articles, right? And then I'm like, hey, I'm caught up, and then I go out the next day, and like, there's a whole bunch of new stuff that happened. We know from an organizational culture standpoint, support at the top with our provosts and our deans was crucial to making this thing happen. It was all across the entire organization, right? A lot of good discussion by the group, and we worked at, I would say, corporate speed. We also know that there are some things that are important here is the importance of people, right? Again, this isn't just a technology thing. When you're trying to change an organization, it's a people thing. It's actually in some ways more a people thing than the technology. And so basically, no one's got it figured out, right? There's too much that's changing too fast. You got to keep learning and sharing the feedback. Every day is a fresh start, just like Prometheus getting his liver chopped pulled out. And so every organization has got to become a learning organization, right? I like this quote from Alvin Toffler. He said, the illiterate of the 21st century are not those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. We're sort of in this three-phase approach, right? First phase is like basically getting rid of the risk and educating people. So you put together a policy, you have a philosophy, you educate people, you see where your organization's at. We are now through at UNC that phase. A lot of organizations are not. Now moving into phase two, we're trying to figure out use cases where we can start implementing this and teaching research and operations in the university, picking out partners, figuring out and starting to pilot, right? Once we get to that, that's going to take us a while. Once we'll get through the pilots and we learn from them, we're going to expand it to many other parts of the university, right? We want to replicate those. So with that, we're going to turn it over for questions.
Great. Put your hands together for Mark McNeilly.
Thank you.
I will come to you with the microphone. For those that are online, please put your questions in the question and answer button at the bottom. And Graham, if you see a question come up, let me know. So questions, we'll start over here.
What's the unemployment rate going to be in 10 years?
I don't think anyone knows. There's, and I think it's going to differ by profession, right? So in the law profession, it can replicate a lot of what lawyers can do, at least the first year lawyers and the paralegals, right? So at the beginning, I was like, man, this is going to really impact the legal profession. On the flip side, you saw the legal issues with it, right? There should be a whole new field for lawyers in this thing. So, yeah.
I'll go to Lloyd Kramer before Lloyd has to go to his event. Lloyd.
Yes, I want to ask a historical question.
Oh, good. Awesome.
how will this help us solve intractable problems like the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians, or the Ukrainians and the Russians? How can it help us solve real world political and social conflicts? Any ideas?
I mean, I don't, I told you about DeepMind, where this is like get super intelligence and then, solve all the world's problems. I don't think it's that easy. I think a lot of that is people stuff. A lot of it is historical stuff. I mean, you know better than I, right? And that's, this can help give you opinions. It can help give you ideas, but with the stuff that's going on in any of these countries, it's part of it's almost part of the DNA in those countries, right? So to change that, it's beyond the capabilities of AI.
Question over here, then I'll come here. I've got a question over here.
It seems to me it can make a lot of change. It can do a lot to deal with the conflicts, political conflicts that we're having in the United States, and the big divide between people and so forth. I mean, it seems it can have a massive impact on that, depending on who uses it and how.
Well, so that's interesting. So one of the problems with it is it can generate fake photos, right? So there was a picture of, when Trump was going through he's being indicted. There are all kinds of fake pictures of him being arrested, right, and being pulled down by police. There was one of the Pope wearing some really fancy jacket, right, and people were all outraged at the Pope. So first thing you got to do is, like, whenever you see a picture, you read a story, you better wait a second, is this real or not? I mean, you have to be a lot better consumer of media. Now on the flip side, and so are you familiar with the UNC program for public discourse? So they're a program that is trying to improve constructive discourse on campus, and then that's now morphing into the School for Civic Life and Leadership. And there are lots of tools. There's actually things you can do with AI. So you can go, put in an article from a politician or a speech from a politician, and you can have it check for logical fallacies, right? You can, I can role play with it. So if I'm trying to learn how to do, knowing you should have constructive discourse is very different from knowing how to have constructive discourse. It's a skill, and you can role play with generative AI on constructive discourse, right? You can. There's some research that was done. One of the people was from Duke. That it had two people, right? Somebody from the left and somebody from the right, say, talking about gun control, and they were talking about, each giving their views, and how those things usually degenerate pretty fast, right? What it did is it, you could type in, here's my response to this person, and then the generative AI would give you, let me tell you how to do that a little bit more constructively, right? And you could either use that or not use that, right? Or tweak your answer, but it was able to interject, right? And give your amygdala, like a 5 seconds to slow down and think about, am I really going to tell this people that they're an idiot? And I think I'm going to help change their mind? Probably not, right? So that's another way that it can do that. So I think we're just beginning to understand how you could use generative AI to actually improve the discourse, train people to be more constructive, both just overall, as you practice it, but also in the moment.
We have a question here.
Yeah, shall I hold it? Oh, okay.
I never let go of the mic.
So when we put it in charge of decision making, let's say financial decisions, let's say the quants.
Yeah.
Or let's say military.
Yes.
And we don't know how it arrives at the answers it gives, and yet it needs to operate quickly.
Right.
Then we're just sort of at the mercy of this, which may be hallucinating, confabulating, or leading us completely astray.
Yeah.
How do you?
Well, this is why theoretically you're supposed to have somebody, the human, like in the military one, in the kill chain, right? Or in a quant thing, you're supposed to have somebody before it should. This is one of the problems with the Wall Street, right? When the computers are all doing all the stuff, it just goes off. They're all interacting and they're going off and doing things that you didn't know that they were going to do. It's an alignment problem, right? So this is why you theoretically always need a human in that process. But I mean, the other thing about when you look at generative AI or any type of AI, but it's particularly generative AI in military uses. So, have anyone ever played Go? you've heard it, you know chess. Go is an Asian game, right? Yeah, it's a much more complex. It's much easier to teach a computer to play chess than it is to teach it to play Go well, right? So DeepMind, who I talked about from Google, created this thing called AlphaGo, which was able to defeat any player in the world, right? And what they found was that the AI is extremely aggressive. It comes up with moves that humans never thought about, and it's extremely fast. All those same things translate over into the military realm, right? It's extremely aggressive. It does things that we don't expect, and it's very fast. Operates at very much greater speed than we can. No, you don't. This is why theoretically you want to have a human in it, but if you think about so there was some research. There was a guy named Curl Boyd who did this thing called the OODA loop. Anyone hear of the OODA loop? So he looked at like why did American pilots shoot down communist pilots in Korea at like an 8-to-1 ratio, and basically he found that they went through something called the OODA loop much faster. And so OODA loop is I observe what's going on, I orient what is happening, I decide and I act. That's OODA, right? And I go through that process fast, right? And the faster I go through that process, I get what's called get inside the opponent's OODA loop. So they're going slower, right? You're going faster, and they're always reacting to you, right? Generative AI is going to have a much faster OODA loop than we do, right? And as we interject ourselves in it, it's going to slow down our OODA loop, right? And this is where you get to like, do I let it go and do its thing because it can defeat my enemy, even if it's going to go maybe do something bad, or do I keep the human in there at the risk of slowing everything down?
We have a question here. I have questions on deck. I've seen hands raised. We also have questions online. I want to remind online folks that we have a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I'll be over to get one of those in just a moment. Charlie?
So a question, it seems to me that the impact of this on white collar employment could be as profound as automation was to blue collar employment. One of the consequences of that would be exacerbating the income inequality that already exists and cause significant dislocations in society.
Yep.
How and who can we prepare for this?
So Sam Altman is the guy that runs OpenAI. So OpenAI is an interesting company. It's got about 400 employees in San Francisco, created by Sam Altman and Elon Musk, actually, with the idea of making sure that AI was safe. That was the original mission of OpenAI. Somewhere along the line, they decided, never mind. Let's see how we can make it super powerful. So that's what they decided to do. Elon Musk drops out. OpenAI continues under Sam Altman, who is he's the whole profile. I dropped out of college. I started my startup. I sold it for $43 million, right? And now he's running OpenAI, right? And what their goal is to move from what's called artificial narrow intelligence, which is AI does something, a narrow task like driving really, really well, better than humans, or at least as good as humans, to artificial general intelligence, where it can do everything we do as well as us, to artificial super intelligence, which it can do everything we do, but way better than us, right? So in terms of the jobs, now I forgot what your original question was.
It was concerning job disruption.
Yeah, so job disruption. Oh, yeah, so Sam Altman. So his idea is, okay, we're going to go in this world of artificial superintelligence, and humans can decide whether they want to work or not, because it's going to do all the jobs, right? And especially when it goes to robotics, eventually they'll put it with robotics. They're doing it now, right? OpenAI and I think Boston Dynamics. And so it's going to do all the jobs. So we got to create this thing called universal basic income, right? So it'd be like, okay, we're going to tax all the people that run these companies with AI, and we're going to give the humans basically, you're going to live on this, right? And so the question then becomes of like, well, where do I derive my meaning? Like if I derive my meaning from work and being productive, then, do I just stay home and play games, right? And a computer can beat me in all these games, so I don't know how to do that. Or do I, although actually, there's more people playing chess now that after computers have beaten all the humans at chess than there were before. So it's actually recreated the interest in chess. So that's one of the debates. Like, do I have kids? Like, I don't know. It's like one argument is like, do I want my kids to live in this dystopia, or maybe I got nothing better to do than raise kids, right? So I'm just going to spend all my time with my family. So there's a couple arguments on that, right? I mean, I think what you're also going to see, and this is where people start to think I'm a little bit on the edge, but right, you're going to have, you're seeing it now. So they have AI girlfriends and boyfriends online, right? And so they're there, and you can either have a nice conversation with them and they'll be supportive, or you can flirt with them, or farther versions of that, right? But you're eventually going to marry that with robots, right? And so in the future, like, do I decide, hey, I want to marry a actual human being and have them as a spouse, right, with all the foibles that a human being has, or do I have an AI robot, right, or multiple AI robots, right, who can have the companionship, but also can do everything around the house that I didn't want to do, right? So that's kind of a question, right? And so when you think about AI ending humanity, it could either kill us all, or it could be like, no, I'm just going to replace humans. And so why would I reproduce, right? We're already seeing the fertility rate drop, like a rock in a lot of countries. So anyway, that's a little bit more of a dystopian future.
We have a question, online question. I see hands up in the audience, so I'll come around to those. Online question from Tom Taylor. Can AI help social media companies flag false information?
Well, it can generate a lot of false information. I think that's probably more just traditional AI. And I think this is the question that social medias are dealing with already. It's like, they're deciding what to flag, right? And it's like, well, who are you to decide what to flag, right? We know that the government has been working with some of social media companies to, flag content that we found out later was true. So how much do we want them to be flagging this stuff? On the other hand, if you're an advertiser, you don't want to be on a platform where people are getting aggravated and it's a bad experience, right? Or people are saying, hateful stuff, that now your brand's associated with it. So the social media companies are in a huge conundrum of how much speech do I allow, right? And it differs by different countries. So in the UK, right, if you actually, say something on Facebook, the police can show up at your door and say like, hey, you said this thing on Facebook, and like, you shouldn't be doing that, right? You can't, obviously, at least so far today, you can't do that in the United States, but that's where a lot of European countries are going. And so the social media companies they do one thing in the United States, they do something else in Europe, they do something else in the Middle East, right? But the question, I think that would be just regular AI, but that's really not, flagging the stuff is technologically easy. It's the question of ethically, what do I flag and what don't I flag?
We have a question here.
You're working to bring AI to a big campus. What would it cost to bring AI to a small group of people?
Depends on what you want to do. I mean, you can use ChatGPT 3.5, it's free, right? So you can use that, but now if I want to take that Copilot thing, where I put ChatGPT inside of my Office, my Teams, my Outlook, right? It's charged per seat. So for me to use my Office tools, it costs me $30. It costs UNC $30 a month for me to have access to Office, right? For me now to have Copilot, it's going to be another $30 a month, right? Take that extra $30 a month, multiply it by 12 months, and multiply that by 43,000 people, 13,000 employees, 30,000 students. That's a lot of money you're chunking out every month, right? So, and this is what Microsoft is trying to figure out, like, how much do I charge people? Because the problem for generative AI, it costs a lot more. It costs way more to answer a prompt in generative AI than it does a search, right? Probably 10 times more, because it just takes that way more compute power. And the compute power uses energy, and the compute power actually uses water, right? So it is a significant bigger money and resource user than regular AI. So they're going to charge us for it.
We have a question here.
Yes, I believe that Biden mentioned that he was shown a deep fake of his voice after 3 seconds. They recorded 3 seconds and pretty well fooled him.
Mm-hmm.
Have we seen real deep fakes in international relations and spying relations? Is it working yet, or is that something in the future?
Well, I mean, what the problem is, we've already had a bunch of you can always do a lot of deep fake stuff already, right? I think this just, I mean, you're seeing it in the Middle East. I mean, people are posting pictures that were from Syria and they're saying they're happening in Gaza right now. So to a certain extent, does it exacerbate the problem? Yes. Yeah, but you could do it already right now, not even generating a new picture, just falsely labeling an old picture from some other country, right? That's all over the internet now. So,
Question here.
I think earlier you cited that at the bottom of one of the screens might be something like a caveat, which is beware, this may not be true.
Yeah.
I'm used to thinking of a principle within technology and technology development as repeatable and reliable.
Right.
And certified.
Yes.
Are we headed to the ability to repeat repeatably, reliably, and to certify the results, or is it always this caveat going to be in place?
They're trying to reduce the amount of hallucinations and bias, but you have to, it's very different than when you think about traditional programming, right? You write a program, you put in some input, it follows this chain of logic and it pops something out, right? If I put in that same input, I'm always going to get the same output. That's not how generative AI works. You're putting in input, it's going into a neural network, right? Which, and the network is set up so that if I say, please close the, right? It could answer door, it could answer window, right? It could answer laptop screen, right? It depends on how often it's used in the large language model. And it's always going to change, because that's part of how you get the right, and that's how this thing works well. If it always did this most often, it doesn't work well, right? So it's always going to give you different answers. So if you just hit regenerate on the same prompt, it's going to give you a different answer. Now, it might be related to what you asked before, but it's going to be different, right? Just like, people don't like to anthropomorphize or make AI sound human, but this thing is modeled on the human brain, right? So it doesn't, when you put an input in, there's no guarantee the output that comes out is going to be different, right? And it's also may or may not be correct, because the stuff it pulled off from is, some of it's wrong, right? And some of it, or if it doesn't have information, it's making it up, right? Or it's got biases in it, right? It pulls off the internet. Well, there's lots of biases on the internet.
Question?
Okay, are you related to Phil Donahue? And AI is going to solve all the world's problems, correct? How do you convince 8 billion idiots to agree with it?
Oh, I don't think, well, first off, I don't think it's going to solve.
Could I answer the first question? No, I'm not related to Phil Donahue.
Yeah, no, well, I don't think it's going to solve all the world's problems. I mean, because it's got all the same problems that we have. It's built off of us, right? And so I don't think it will. And I think you're going to have, I mean, right now, when I was asked, we thought about because I was kind of doing all this AI stuff, I was running around, talked to probably like 30 different groups at least in the on campus or places like this, right? And when I was doing that, and I was talking about in March about doing a class for my MBA online students in July. And I was thinking, I was literally questioning, like, is this class going to be obsolete before I do it in July? Because I was thinking everyone's going to be using it in July. It's going to be old news. If we're still here, and I would say, like, there was some research that came out that looked at students, about less than 50% of students are using it frequently. These are college students, right? We are literally trying to force students to use it. And part of it is because their fear of it being seen as cheating, because they're still getting that message, right? And it still feels weird. Like, I'm doing this thing and I'm like getting the answer, and so that's weird, right? So it feels sort of like cheating, and they don't know how to do it well. And also, you have a certain workflow. So when you're dealing with adults, right, even 18-year-olds, right, they have a workflow, a way of doing things that has worked, right? That's because otherwise they wouldn't be at UNC, right? And so to change their workflow it's the set of habits, right? It's hard to change someone's habits. And so they have to take this new technology and figure out, how do I inject it into my workflow in a way that's productive? And it's going to be a learning curve. And some people don't want to go through that learning curve because they're too busy, or it's like, what I'm doing is working, right? It's working for now, but when everybody else goes to generative AI, you're in trouble. As far as professors, only about 22% are using it frequently, right? At the same time, the research says that like the majority of professors realize that it's a skill their students are going to need. So it's like, well, okay, if the vast majority of you think it's a skill people are going to need, might behoove you to actually learn how to do it yourself, right?
I mean, it was from my experience in my classroom, as I mentioned,
Yeah.
this fear that I had when I went into the classroom that my online evaluations were at risk.
Yeah.
Yet only about a third of the students out of 35 students had ever used it, right?
Yeah.
And so here I am teaching them
Yeah.
how to do it. And we've had some really incredible generative conversations. We've called out when it's hallucinating or making up things because we have domain knowledge that it doesn't happen just through the course that we're taking. So it's been really eye-opening. And one thing I'm doing when I assign papers now is I'm also giving them 4 or 5 examples of how AI has answered this prompt and said, okay, this is what AI is doing, do better.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
we have Diane McGrath. I think this is it Diane? I don't see the last name, but yes, McGrath. Hello, Diane. Can you talk a little bit about these ideas in medicine, a little bit more about AI's transformative role in medicine?
Oh yeah, for sure. I just didn't have the slide on that, but you're seeing, so what it can do is it will do, like you can put in the symptoms, you know, like here it's a 75-year-old man, this person has these symptoms, right? And it will say, okay, it's probably this, right? It can list out all the things that it might be, and then it will then give you a plan of treatment, right? So you can think of as a doctor or a nurse, it's going to help you make sure that I've thought about all the stuff. And then it can also give me the treatment, and it all does that very quickly. And then I can use my domain knowledge and say, I think this is correct, or I think it's incorrect. And then I can go off and do that. And potentially that leaves me more time to actually interact with the patient and ask them the right questions. Because the prompts you're putting in about the man and the symptoms, how well you ask, this is when my wife is here, she's a nurse, she was a nurse, is you can ask them, how well you get the intake, their explanation of the symptoms is going to drive how good that prompt is, right? So that's the challenge. And, not having enough time to ask them the symptoms, them not feeling comfortable giving you all the symptoms, them forgetting stuff, right? So that's the human part that still matters, but it will be able to pop stuff out very fast, right? And it could leave you more time to basically ask about what those symptoms are, right?
Do you have a question here? Yes.
I'm wondering about the creativity part. As say I want to do a haiku about a full moon.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that AI or
Yeah, it does it
generative
really.
easily.
Yeah.
But that's not creative.
Mhm.
And so I don't see how things besides the human brain can be creative.
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on your definition of creativity. I mean, it does create things, right? It generates things. I mean, that's in the name, creation, in the beginning, Genesis, that's all about creation. Now, whether this is a debate we had on the panel of, so I was saying at one point, you saw some of the pictures that I had generated, right? And I used to say, well, I created those pictures, but I thought, I didn't really create those. I mean, I have no skill to create those things. And so it created it. And the question was, well, then what do you call what I did, right? And at least the answer that came out on the panel, which I thought was good, was like, you're sort of inspiring it, right? You're saying, this is the inspiration for what I want to see. You go off and you create it, right? So it's a complementary act between you and this tool, right? Now, most of that really belongs, most of that thing that comes out probably belongs to the tool. But for the haiku, as an example, it depends on what you wrote the haiku about, right? So you're inspiring it to write a haiku about a certain thing. It's just like you commissioning a painting, right? And you say, for example, we had 2 dogs, right? And they would often sit together kind of curled up. And so we asked a painter to create not a painting, but a black and white sketch of 2 dogs curled up, but it looked like a yin and yang symbol, right? And so we didn't make it, but we inspired the artist to go do that, right? And I think she did that, and I think she sold other versions of it. So for her, it's probably a good deal.
One question here. I might have to hand over the microphone in this. Actually, no, I can do this. My Phil Donahue days are still with me, so excuse me one second. Oops, I'm sorry, excuse me.
I only scanned an article today about Biden's proposed restrictions. Yeah. How in the world could that be enforced, especially relative to weapons and military? I mean, it seems to me the genie's out of the bottle.
Yeah, I think the genie is out of the bottle, and you know, a lot of the companies are saying. So one of the things that we don't know how to solve is the alignment problem. The big alignment problem being like, how do we make sure this thing doesn't kill us all in the end, right? And there are people who are saying like, don't worry about it, it's never going to do that, or we use other AI to stop this other AI, right? And so there's lots of debates about that, and the people that think that could kill everyone are called doomers. But the thing that is frightening to a large extent is that these companies. So Sam Altman is the same guy who'll say like, this can be nirvana, and he said it today or yesterday, but it could kill us all, right? But he's still like, he's still pushing down that path, and he pushes down that path, and it makes a ton of money, and Microsoft is along with him and OpenAI, and Google's on with him, and Amazon's with them, and Meta's with them, and they're all pouring billions of dollars into this thing, right? And so that's all happening. And so yeah, these companies have safety teams, right? So OpenAI has set aside a significant amount of money for their alignment team. But on the other hand, Google actually reduced the size of their safety team, and they told the safety team is like, you are slowing us down because we got to catch up with OpenAI. And so they're like, so quit flagging all these things as safety because we got to catch up with these guys, right? So there's this thing called the Moloch trap. So Moloch was a god in Mesopotamia, right? And this was a god to which you would actually sacrifice your children, right? Yeah, so it's like a bad god, right? So the thing called the Moloch trap is like everyone is trying to optimize for themselves, but in the process of optimizing for yourself, you destroy what you have, right? And that's the Moloch trap. And that's what, to a certain extent, people are describing this as everyone's trying to get ahead, but in the process, they're making, in the end, it's going to be like a disaster for everybody, right? Because everyone's trying to get the advantage, right? And especially the idea of sacrificing your children, right? You're sacrificing the future with this. So that's the kind of the challenge.
Yeah. That was a comment about the international ramifications of that.
There's another question over here.
Yeah, I have a question. I'll get here and I'll get one. Go ahead.
Look at the state of the world now.
Yeah.
And add AI.
Yeah.
Do the math.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why I said we're not destined to live in peaceful times, right? It's going to get only worse. And this is where I differ from, this is probably what's going to get me in trouble. It's not being recorded. So a lot of what universities are trying to do, right, we have significant mental health issues on campus, is we are trying to create safe spaces for people, right? And my argument is that is not the world that we're going into. And we need instead to teach resilience and adaptability and something called anti-fragility, which is anti-fragility. So things that are fragile, when you hit them, they break easily, right? Something that is resilient is you hit it and it comes back just as strong as it was. Anti-fragile is I hit this thing and it comes back stronger, right? That's really what humans do when we are faced with challenges, right? We learn and become stronger through challenges. That's how you develop self-confidence, right? And so that's what we need to be doing, is teaching our students resilience, right? Because this world that we're going to go into it's going to be in a much more challenging world, whether it's geopolitically, whether it's technologically.
Could you give us a couple of examples of the alignment? And if, I heard you talk about it, but I just need the couple of examples.
So the one was the Amazon thing. So that was where I was going to hire people like I have before, which makes a whole lot of sense, right? But then it starts kicking out women. There's the classic thing, which is called the paperclip. So if I optimize computers to provide the most, the optimal number of paper clips to humanity at the lowest possible cost in an environmental way, right? It can go off and start doing that. But then if you say the amount of paper clips needed by humanity, and it figures out, well, if there's no humanity, then I can do this at the lowest possible cost. That's the alignment problem, right? this is it. Like I set it off to do this, and it's like, wow, that makes sense. And then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, we're gonna. And so another. I mean, so there's that. But there's also, and this I have to attribute to Thomas Hofweber, who is a philosophy professor at UNC and was on our panel, and he had this example. He said, you know, the chimpanzees, right? They're actually stronger than us, right? You never want to, don't ever go into a cage with a chimpanzee because you're you're probably not going to come out. So, but they're stronger than us, but they're just slightly not as smart, right? And what's happened to chimpanzees, because we are smarter than them, we've gone on and done all these amazing things, and we don't have anything against chimpanzees, but they're becoming extinct, or they're endangered, not because we have anything against chimpanzees, but we're just growing into all their places, right? So that's kind of what the concern is with AI. It's going to be set off, going off to do stuff. It has nothing against us, right? But it's just a matter of it's optimized to do X, and we're not helping do it to do X, right? This is taking a really dark turn. I didn't really know.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like you're getting into the emergent capabilities. And
Yeah.
Is it possible? I mean, can you imagine it writing its own code, and perhaps a code that's not particularly helpful to anyone?
Yeah, and it's not just it's not just it. It's there's people that are making it, that are telling it to do bad stuff. So there's something called Auto GPT, where it's not like you ask it a question and gives you an answer and it stops. Auto GPT is you give it a task to do, and it goes off and starts to try and complete that task, right? So it's actually, and you give it the ability to code, you give it the ability to go to the internet, right? So it's off doing stuff. And this one person, I think it's called Doom GPT, where it was actually created to hey, it's optimized to figure out a way to destroy the world. And some guy set that thing up, right? So it's not just that the machine's going to go off. I mean, there's lots of people in the world that are, not well, and they know how to code, or they know how to do stuff, right? So this is the challenge.
Miriam.
So if you had a student come up to you and say, I'm really concerned about my future, what career field should I go into? What job should I have that will be preserved?
I think to answer that's really impossible. What I would say is I would go back to the things that I talked about of what abilities you need, right? So it goes back to domain knowledge, initiative, right? Ability to influence people, because if I'm in a business meeting, right, and I'm asked a question, I can't say, oh, wait a second, let me ask Chat GPT what the answer is, right? Whoops. I've got to know that on myself, right? And how well I convey that, and how influential I am in that meeting, is to determine how fast I go up the chain, right? So those are the skills, and I tell this to my students, I grade on participation, right? And I tell the students, I said, the reason I have a high percent of my grade on participation, especially in the business world, is because that's how you are judged in the business world, right? If you sit there in a meeting and you don't say anything, people assume you don't have anything to add, right? We reward in the business world people who speak up, people who make good arguments, people who are influential, and those are the people we pick to lead. And if you just sit there and don't say anything, you might get so far, but you're not going to get really far. So it's a lot of the other. So David Brooks in the New York Times, I think, said it well. He said, in the age of AI, major in being human. So what is the human skills I have? And again, I go back to ancient Greek. A lot of this is where we're returning back to the oral tradition in a lot of ways.
I have to just interject that it seems to me that the skills that are offered in the humanities, which would give you a deep understanding of how humans behave in situations, how humans can put together disparate ideas, can adapt, can communicate these ideas, that the humanities are in fact going to be an instrumental skill to have.
Yeah, I mean, the humanities.
Do we have a round of applause for the humanities?
Okay. I'm a big fan of the humanities. Now, I think there's a lot in like I've been talking about ancient Greece and ancient Rome. I think there's a lot of that still applies, that we have from that heritage, that maybe the humanities could go back and revisit. But yeah.
And
So I'm curious also, it sounds to me that there are certain industries, obviously
Yeah.
the service sector where somebody has to actually physically do something.
Right.
But also for lack of having to speak for the STEM side of things,
Yes.
being in the laboratory and making observations and doing the
Yes.
experiment, it's not clear to me that we will automate those things anytime soon. Certain aspects are highly automated already. So that's kind of where I'm asking you to go, like industry wise, not just skill wise.
Yeah. So I mean, there's the cognitive jobs are being impacted now, right? So one of the things you could tell people is like, oh, be a plumber, or you do something manual, right? The question is how long it's going to take for robotics to be able to do what we do. And what's happening now is OpenAI is giving ChatGPT generative AI capabilities to Boston Dynamics, who makes the best robots in the world. And eventually they're going to, I mean, we'll see, but I mean, probably I would bet that we'll have advanced robots, right, that could do all the work, physical stuff, plumbing, whatever, right? And so I can't tell you what I think it's more about figuring out what are the things I do well that can differentiate me from what AI can do. The problem is AI keeps continuing to advance, so in ways that we never expected. So to be able to say that this is the way you career yourself, I don't think that's.
let's put our hands together for Professor Mark McNeilly. I'm going to put Professor McNeilly into standby mode for just a moment and invite him back. He is a real person, by the way. So I just want to say that. Yeah, this is absolutely fascinating, and I'm glad we didn't spend too much time on the absolute doom scenarios that we could just have fantasies about. Thank you for coming out today. I just want to remind you folks that Carolina Public Humanities has wonderful programs. This Humanities in Action continues for 2 more weeks. We have 2 more talks, one coming up on environmental law next week, and our final one is just a look across the country on various changes to laws involving abortion access. So those are our last 2 Humanities in Action. We have a wonderful event with Tim Carter coming up on Saturday, November 18th, What is Opera? And we have on the following day, on Sunday, you can go to our website for information on it, where we're teaming up with the Triangle Chamber Orchestra. Did I say that? Sunday, November 12th. And you can get information on that on our website as well. And it's nice. You want a weekend of music on Saturday. You can do opera with Tim Carter and then come to the performance where we'll have a post-performance discussion as well. Pre-performance? Ask Beth Gardner. She knows all the details. I'm obviously bad AI. I've got, my input was not good. So, yes, I'm hallucinating up here. Interestingly enough, I saw that there is actually something called the Triangle Psychedelic Society. There's a flyer for it right out there. So maybe I stopped there first. At the end of the semester, I want to remind folks we also have Modern Civic Life and Public Health Across the Americas. That's another weekend seminar. And finally, if anyone was here, we had an absolutely wonderful time with Dawn Landis on October 25th. It was brilliant and beautiful. We are doing another music program. Remember, these start at 6 o'clock, not at 4:30. That's at the end of the month. With Kate McGarry and Keith Gans. These are Grammy-nominated jazz singer and guitarist. Should be wonderful. Check us out. Go to humanities.unc.edu to find out our full things. Let's put our hands together for Flyleaf Books. Let's put our... Yes, and remember, it's a bookstore. There's something that bookstores do very well, and it's all out there. So feel free to browse on your way out. We want to put our hands together for Beth Gardner and Graham Hill for getting us out there. Want to thank the Mirka Baumberger Group at Morgan Stanley, the North Carolina Yana Society, Carolina Alumni, and Carolina Meadows, a retirement community in Chapel Hill, for being our sponsors and partners. And one more time, come back up here. Mark McNeilly, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Folks, we'll see you next time. Check us out. Line up, sign up, get involved. We'll see you soon.